Hello, everyone from Rome. Dear distinguished participants, welcome to our online webinar. Because of the coronavirus pandemic, the panel is planned to be held as a webinar. My name is Murat Pazarbaşı. I am press consular of the Embassy of the Republic of Turkey in Rome. I will do the moderating task today. Before I start, I would like to mention that I am very excited as this is my first time as a moderator. I would like to apologize in advance in case I make any mistakes, and thank you for your understanding. July 15 has an important place in Turkey's struggle for freedom and democracy against the coup attempt. Today is the 4th anniversary of the coup attempt. Within the scope of the commemorative activities organized by the Directorate of Communications, the Presidency of the Republic of Turkey, 15 panels on July 15. We are together in this event. Only on 15th of July, Turkey and the Turkish nation went through the dramatic chain of events that caught the millions in Turkey and beyond unprepared. The government, opposition parties, civil society organizations, and ordinary citizens joined together to defend the democratic order. This was an historic moment for Turkey. I was working as a journalist in Ankara on that night when 251 citizens were murdered. On this occasion, I would like to commemorate them once again with mercy, and thousands of our citizens became veterans on that night. I am one of the closest witnesses of that Black Night orchestrated by the Fethullah terrorist organization. I personally witnessed the military helicopters that opened fire and the tanks passed over the cars. Even today, it is not possible to forget the horrible images that continued until the first light of the following morning. I wish those moments that I still have difficulty in finding the right words to express will never be lived again. Dear guests, today our theme is current state of affairs of Turkish foreign policy and Turkish-Italian relation on the 4th anniversary of the July 15 coup attempt. In our webinar, we will have the opportunity to hear from our valuable and distinguished panelists. I would like to briefly introduce them to you. High Excellency Murat Salim Esani, Ambassador of the Republic of Turkey to Italy. High Excellency Carlo Marsili, former Ambassador of the Italian Republic. Dear Valeria Gianotta, Associate Professor, Doctor, University of the Turkish Aeronautical Association. And dear Hasan Basri Alchun, Associate Professor, Doctor, Istanbul Commerce University, Director of Strategic Research at the Foundation for Political, Economic and Social Research. I want to start the opening speech with Mr. Ambassador Murat Salim Esani. And before Mr. Ambassador starts, I would like to give some information about him. Mr. Esani received his Bachelor of Arts degree from the American University in Washington, D.C. on communications, legal institutions, economics, and government in 1984, and his Master of Arts degree on international relations, international law, and the U.S. government in 1999 from the St. John's University in New York. After commencing his professional life at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Turkey in 1984, Ambassador Esani, throughout his career, has assumed various positions at Turkey's embassies in Washington, D.C. and Mexico City, as well as Turkish permanent missions to the United Nations in New York and Geneva, and worked as the Chief of Staff and Counselor to 8 Ministers of Foreign Affairs. Between 2009 and 2013, he served as Turkey's ambassador to the People's Republic of China. Ambassador Esani took office as Deputy Undersecretary for European Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs between 2013 and 2016. Since November 15, 2016, Ambassador Esenli has been Turkey's ambassador to Rome. Ambassador Esenli, who is also an international consultant of the Asia Fortune Forum. Your Excellency Esenli, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I would like to thank the Directorate of Communications of Presidency for this webinar, which is very timely. On the occasion of the 4th anniversary of the July 15 heinous coup attempt, firstly, just like you did, I wish God's mercy upon those who sacrificed their lives in defense of national will and democracy against FETÖ terrorist organization. I also wish speedy recovery to those who have been receiving medical treatment due to the injuries that they sustained on that fateful night. On a global level, terrorism and security threats posed by extremism and fanaticism are among the biggest concerns of the state in the 21st century. Terrorist groups are benefiting from the information age that we are currently living in. And now they have the capability to acquire necessary equipment and technologies easier and faster to reach their sinister aims. Our democratic society is based on transparency, rule of law, liberty, and functionality are taken full advantage of. In line with the information age, characteristics of terrorism and terrorist activities have changed. To this end, FETÖ can be considered a new generation terrorist organization which ruthlessly utilized all the advantages an open and goodwill society has provided. FETÖ is a criminal cult-like organization and a terrorist syndicate with global aspirations, which aims at infiltrating in all state apparatus by using code names, special communication programs, money transfers from dubious sources, wiretapping, bugging, and money laundering. And FETÖ terrorist organization is still largely present in more than 160 countries, with schools, media institutions, foundations, NGOs, business associations, and companies. Of course, since 2016, after the foiled coup attempt, the real intent of FETÖ has been clearly exposed, including in Italy. And their operational areas have been substantially reduced. And another reminder is that this insidious structure has introduced itself to the international community as a charitable educational movement. This was done mainly at the initial stages. We have emphasized on various occasions our expectations from relevant countries regarding their extradition requests for FETÖ-affiliated individuals so that due process of law can function. We are also expecting cooperation from relevant countries against the financing of terrorism, especially fulfilling our expectations regarding the freezing of assets of FETÖ-affiliated individuals. Thanks to the informative activities on FETÖ by Turkey, awareness on the true face of it has been gradually increasing. And this could also be said for a number of countries. And of course, Italy is most certainly in the forefront with respect to a much higher awareness about FETÖ. Certain countries and international organizations acknowledge FETÖ as a terrorist organization. To name few, FETÖ was declared as a terrorist organization on the 43rd session of the OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Foreign Ministers meeting in 2016. And then at the Asian Parliamentary Assembly, a similar decision was taken in 2017. And Pakistani Higher Court also took a decision in that direction, in the same direction in 2018. And in 2019, the four political parties represented at the Turkish Grand National Assembly issued a joint statement regarding FETÖ. In the statement, the parties called the extradition of FETÖ members to Turkey, primarily head of FETÖ, Fethullah Gülen. The joint statement indicates the common stance of the Turkish people, and it further strengthens our resolve against this terrorist organization. Growing awareness concerning FETÖ in the third countries has led to further scrutiny of its activities by the local authorities. In a number of countries, illegal schemes designed by FETÖ are being brought to light. Very recently, and I find this particular example to be quite significant, narcotics unit in Turkey have carried out an operation named Bataklık, which translates as swamp in English, toward a criminal organization which was active in drug trafficking. Preliminary findings by the Turkish law enforcement units suggest that this criminal organization financed FETÖ and conducted certain activities even in Italy. With the growing awareness, as I have mentioned earlier, so far more than 120 members of FETÖ have been extradited to Turkey from more than 20 countries. In 38 countries, activities of FETÖ-affiliated schools and language courses have been terminated. In 20 countries, a state institution, the Turkish Marif Foundation, have taken over those educational facades. Now, true to their definition, Turkish Marif Foundation is operating these schools very proficiently. Taking this opportunity, I would like to call on all our European colleagues and partners not to repeat what they did with the PKK and to take their precautionary measures against the FETÖ terrorist organization rapidly. As we recall, the EU finally recognized the PKK as a terrorist organization 18 years after its first attack in Erzurum, Turkey. Distinguished participants, I would like to turn to this dramatic experience's impact on Turkish foreign policy. After the coup attempt, Turkey have engaged in information campaign with all its missions abroad. And my country has formulated its security paradigm accordingly. Now it is following a strategy that focuses on eliminating the security threats at the source. After all, preemptive approach was the common response and strategy as well following the 9/11. In this way, Turkey commenced Euphrates Shield operation to eliminate Daesh threat along its southern borders. Turkey has become the only NATO member that we need to remember with boots on the ground against Daesh and neutralized more than 4,000 Daesh members. However, Daesh is not the only terrorist organization operating in our neighborhood. The terrorist identity and the separatist agenda of YPG-PYD, which is the Syrian offshoot of PKK, ought to be looked at carefully. PKK is responsible for loss of over 40,000 innocent people since 1984. It's a terrorist organization acknowledged as such by the US and EU countries, including Italy. Well, the relevant question is, are we gaining any ground? Between 2017 and 2019, Turkey engaged a number of operations in Syria against PKK, YPG, PYD, and Daesh. Thanks to these operations, that an area of 4,000 square kilometers have been cleared from terrorist elements. The success of these counterterrorism operations has followed more than the return of 400,000 Syrians to their homelands. Here, I would like to emphasize that Turkey is not and has never been against Kurds. We are against terrorist organizations. We are fighting against PKK elements along the Turkish-Iraqi border as well. In a nutshell, the operations in our vicinity are conducted in order to eliminate the long-standing terror threat against our national security, to contribute to preserve the territorial integrity and unity of our neighbors, to liberate local population from terrorist oppression, and to lay ground for safe and voluntary return of displaced people. At this juncture, I would like to remind the attendees of the webinar that Turkey not only protects its borders, but also protects the borders of NATO and the European Union. Lastly, I would like to touch upon our bilateral relations with Italy. We have a better understanding of each other's predicaments. As the two prominent littoral states of the Mediterranean. We are cooperating and operating extensively. We drive the force from our relations, historic nature, cultural affinity, our NATO alliance, and the intense contact which exists between our leaders, ministers, academicians, and business community. Excuse me. Through the regular consultations at various levels, Italy has a deeper understanding of challenges which we face. Even under difficult global conditions, our trade volume reached and remained at $20 billion both in 2017 and 2018. We managed to maintain $19 billion level in 2019. We are happy to observe the rise in mutual investments and infrastructure building. We are sharing our experience with our strategic partner Italy in every area where we encounter difficulties. In conclusion, I'm happy to note that we have similar perspectives on Libya, refugee issues, tourism, counter-tourism, and economic matters with our strategic partner. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. Our second speaker is Mr. Ambassador Carlo Masili. Your Excellency, I will share the information about you while you are preparing. Ambassador Carlo Marsili completed his undergraduate education in the Department of Political Science at the University of Padua. Within the framework of his career at the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs since 1970, he assumed various positions in Germany, Thailand, the United Kingdom, and Indonesia, as well as Turkey. Ambassador Marsili served as the Ambassador of Italy to Jakarta and also as the Ambassador of Italy to Ankara between 2004 and 2010. Ambassador Marsili currently serves as a senior advisor to the Italian Institute for Policy Studies on Turkey. He is the president of the Turkey in Europe Now, which was founded in 2014 to support Turkey's European Union membership. He is senior advisor to the Il Nodo di Gordio think tank and the honorary president of the Italian Association of the Honorary Consuls. Ambassador Marsili, who is also the honorary president of the Italian company Ferrero in Turkey. Mr. Marsili, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much. I am very grateful to the Presidency of the Republic of Turkey and to the Turkish Embassy in Rome for organizing this important meeting on the occasion of the 4th anniversary of July 15, a date which, as it has well remembered by the Turkish ambassador, by the moderator himself, which is dear to everybody supports democracy in the world. And I wanted to extend my best regards to all of you. After the so interesting speech of the Turkish ambassador to Italy, I would like to say a few words on the current foreign policy of Turkey, which is often wrongly criticized on many newspapers, not only Italian, but European and international as well. For instance, Syria. Turkey continues to entrench itself militarily in northern Syria, and it has also deployed more than 10,000 troops to the region. As I always explain to my interlocutors, Turkey knows that ultimately it cannot rely on the United States, Europe, or Russia with regard to the aims of a security zone in northern Syria, where it wants to settle the Syrian refugees in Turkey, who have become a political and economic liability. And we have also to take into account the terrorist activity of the Syrian wing of the PKK. Therefore, a military presence is essential for the Turkish national interest. With no political settlement for Syria in sight, Europe should support the resettlement of refugees in northern Syria, also because of fear of a fresh wave of them heading to Europe. As far as Libya is concerned, both Turkey and Libya decided to support from the beginning President al-Sarraj as the only legitimate government recognized by the United Nations. As a matter of fact, France, Egypt, Emirates, and Russia are more or less supporting General Haftar. And without the Turkish intervention, he would now most probably be the master of the country. There is also another consideration. In the Eastern Mediterranean, Greece, Egypt, Israel, and the Republic of Cyprus reached an agreement to conduct gas drilling without taking into consideration the rights of Turkey because of the never solved issue of Cyprus. Thanks to the agreement signed with Tripoli government, Turkey was able to fix new maritime boundary delineation that enable Ankara to conduct gas activities in a wider part of the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. It is understandable that Turkey is seeking to negotiate new rules in the region, also because I don't see any chance for a reasonable solution of Cyprus issue, as the Greek side has no interest at all in solving it. Now, it would be important for Italy to acknowledge this new situation, also for the activity of any gas national company, for instance. Libya is also a European emergency, and European Union leaders must decide to act together with Turkey and Russia in order to prepare a second Berlin conference with all the Libyan stakeholders and bring about a peace settlement. It will be essential to take into consideration the various factors, and first of all, the border protection, which is of vital importance for Italy, which would have a lot of difficulty in accepting more migrants from Libya. Russia, now for Turkey, Russia, it has become an essential partner after the developments in Syria. I think it's important to take Russia on board, and no crisis solution is possible without Putin, like it or not. And Putin is destined to stay for many years. Being aware, of course, that Russia's geopolitical strategic interests are often opposite to the NATO's ones, it would be important to realize that sanctions are not a good way to deal with Moscow. We need flexible relations, taking in mind, for instance, that the flexibility has so far protected Moscow and Ankara from dangerous clashes, both in Syria and Libya. USA is a question mark because, as we know, in November, the presidential elections will take place there. Maybe it will be better for Turkey if President Trump will be confirmed, given his good personal relations with President Erdogan. Anyhow, European position on this matter is not well defined, except the very clear divergence between Germany and USA. What is important is to maintain a good level of cooperation among NATO members. As far as our bilateral relations are concerned, the recent visits to Ankara of our Minister of Foreign Affairs and our Minister of Defense have undoubtedly contributed to reinforce them. I would like to take the opportunity of the presence today of Professor Valeria Gianotta for citing her very convincing article published on the Daily Sabah exactly 1 month ago, which concluded that Turkey and Italy share many common interests in the Mediterranean. And it would be not difficult to have a common vision on it. Of course, it is very important to underline the Turkish-Italian economic partnership, which is very successful. I strongly believe that it is necessary to modernize and upgrade the customs union and to extend to Turkey the visa liberalization regime with the European Union. Both would be essential elements for a greater economic integration, which will create a win-win situation for all. To conclude, for the immediate future, European Union has, in my view, a strategic interest in maintaining an open dialogue with Turkey. We should revive the big opportunities of the past. As Italian ambassador to Ankara from 2004 to 2010, I witnessed an extraordinary period of cooperation. Now we are facing not easy time. The recent visit to Ankara of the European Union Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell was not very successful, I must say. And it's a pity, because difficulties are the ingredients for a major reset, which is necessary in European Union-Turkey relations. And Italy, I'm sure, will be strongly committed to work in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. We continue with Ms. Gianotta. I want to give a little bit information about Associated Professor Valeria Gianotta. Gianotta completed her undergraduate education, master's and PhD degrees at the Catholic University of Milan and was a lecturer in the Department of Political Science and International Relations at the same university between 2007 and 2011. Since 2010, she has been teaching at Ankara University, Middle East Technical University, Boğaziçi University, Gazikent University, Yıldırım Beyazıt University, Istanbul Sabahattin University. Associated Professor Valeria Gianotta, who has been a lecturer at the University of Turkish Aeronautical Association since 2014, and she is Director of Observatory on Turkey by Study Center for International Political Studies, based in Rome. Ms. Gianotta is the producer of the program titled Turkey is Calling Italy at TRT Italiano. Gianotta, whose articles are occasionally published in the media outlets in Turkey, has authored by book in Italian about our president and AK Party in 2018. Ms. Gianotta, please welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Pazarbaşı. I would like once again to thank the Directorate of Communication of the Presidency of the Republic of Turkey to invite me to give my contribution to this interesting panel. I would like to say hi once again to His Excellency Mr. Ambassador Murat Salimezeli and Mr. Ambassador Carlo Marsili and my colleague, Associate Professor Hasan Basri. Now, we are commemorating this unfortunate event, which was the coup attempt in 15th of July of 2016. Personally, I was here in that time, and as everybody living in Turkey and all Turkish people, we got shocked by an unexpected event. But on the other hand, we were pleased to see how Turkish people are able to unite against a common enemy. I will take then the lead, as Mr. Ambassador just made a quotation about me and my article on the Italian and Turkey relationship. And as any time I'm asked to talk or give a contribution on insight on Italy and Turkey, I would like to start from the assumption that the Italian and Turkish relations are considered something more than a special friendship. Are very strong relationship that they are pivoting on common historical elements, culture, economic data. Both Turkey and Italy are members of some international organizations such as NATO, Council of Europe. Therefore, both Italy and Turkey share the same challenges and the same issues in the international arena. Italy and Turkey, moreover, they have the same Mediterranean identity. And something more that I'm really pleased to underline is that from Turkey towards Italy, from Italy towards Turkey, there is a real and genuine feeling of sympathy, a sort of authentic feeling of solidarity, as it was proved during that unfortunate night of 15th of July 2016, when the Italian government did not hesitate to show his own support and solidarity towards Turkey. The same feeling actually was underlined once again more recently when the Turkish government sent the humanitarian aid to Italy in order to support Italy in its own fight against the COVID pandemic. In that time, actually, as Italian living in Turkey, I felt very emotional, because it was the most darkest time for Italy since the end of the Second World War. And as Italians, we felt a little bit abandoned by our European counterpartners, and Turkey proved to be one of the first countries taking action in order to help Italy. By being understood this, I would like to underline that this strong relationship between Italy and Turkey is based on two basic ingredients, according to me. First, they are the economic data and the strong trade bilateral relationship. We shouldn't underestimate that despite the emergency situation that we are living along this pandemic, the bilateral trade and the bilateral connection between Italy and Turkey did not suffer that much. In 2019, the bilateral trade reached the peak of almost $20 million in exchange, and it was underlined by the recent visit of our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Luigi Di Maio, here in Ankara, to his counterpart, Mevlut Cavusoglu, that the next target is to reach the $30 billion in bilateral exchange. This proves an effect, the fact that between Italy and Turkey there is a solid cooperation, not just from an economic point of view, but on several other sectors, actually. Just by considering the past year, for example, in the past month, the release of the young Italian aid worker Silvia Romano proves how Italy and Turkey cooperate in several areas. They are engaged and they are putting the same effort in some critical issues such as security, counterterrorism, humanitarian trafficking, drug trafficking, and both Italy and Turkey actually, as the first landing point for immigrations, they are facing the same issue. And I'm pretty sure that Italy is welcoming and really appreciates the Turkish effort to welcome and host since 2011 more than 4 million people, refugees people in Turkey, actually. So the relationship between Italy and Turkey is a win-win relations, according to me. It's based on win-win principles. It's based on huge solidarity, cooperation, and reciprocity that helps Italy and Turkey to looking forward, to face the next challenge that all of us globally we are experiencing, I mean, this post-COVID pandemic period. This cooperation is able also to facilitate new form of cooperation at global level in third countries as well. And according to me, this sort of cooperation helps as a facilitator in relation to some critical dossiers. For example, when it comes to the political issue of Eastern Mediterranean, as Mr. Ambassador Marsili mentioned before, of the turmoil situation experiencing in Libya, we can witness that despite some existing frictions that there are between Italy and Turkey, they are part of the game, as in any best friendship, actually, there are frictions. Italy was able to channel the Turkish expectation within the conference in Berlin, for example. And as a gesture of solidarity, Italy did not refuse to sign the joint declaration that Mr. Ambassador mentioned before between Greece, Cyprus, and Egypt, the declaration in Cairo. This is a sign that by pivoting in this strong cooperation, Italy and Turkey are able to forego short-term interest in order to further their well-being and in order to create more room of opportunity for further cooperations globally. I would like just to briefly conclude by saying that this peculiar bilateral relationship is based on reciprocity, and there are already some consolidated synergies that are able to relaunch constructive cooperation, not just between Italy and Turkey with some reflections on the European files and critical files, but to relaunch constructive cooperations globally. At the end of the day, Turkey is a valuable partner for Italy, as it is a valuable partner for all Europe, actually, in this very critical time. Turkey is a young country. Turkey has a very competitive market. Turkey is, thanks to its geopolitical position, can play the role of international hub. And in this critical time, I mean, due to the pandemic, it's necessary to create more synergies based on liberal principles in order to create more margin of cooperation. And I do believe that Turkey and Italy are the perfect actor in order to achieve this point, this target. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Hasan Basri Alchun. I want to give some information about Mr. Alchun. Mr. Alchun completed his undergraduate education in the Department of International Relations, Beykent University in 2004, and received master's degree in the Department of International Relations, Koç University in 2006, with his thesis titled Alliance Formation under the Unipolar Structure, the Case of Turkish United States Alliance in the Second Gulf War. Having completed his doctorate studies in the Department of Political Science, the University of Cincinnati in 2011, Alchun is still working as a lecturer in the Department of International Relations, Istanbul Commerce University. He also acts as the Director of Strategic Studies at the Foundation for Political, Economic, and Social Research, and is a columnist for the Sabah newspaper. Alchun, whose main fields of interest are international relations theory, international security, and the philosophy of social science, has published articles and book chapters in several journals in the said fields. Mr. Alchun, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be a part of this meaningful event with such distinguished speakers. I would like to thank you all and also our speakers to have these provocative ideas covering Turkish foreign policy and its relation with Italy. This July 15 event is one of the most dramatic events in the lives of Turkish people. It was such a dramatic event. I believe it also contributed to build a new understanding in Turkish politics, and it also contributed to developing a new mentality in Turkish foreign policy making. Of course, it was not only just one event playing such a constitutive role. That's why I'm gonna try to just give some highlights from Turkish foreign policy events And I will try to explain that Turkey is having a new foreign policy identity, having a new policy understanding, just because of some experience of last 5 to 6 years. I believe this FETÖ coup attempt is just one part of this, and it also contributed to an understanding in Turkish public and state mentality to understand its relations with mostly Western Europe, Western world, and also Europe as part of it. So we talked about, after 4 years, I believe that we talked about the causes of FETÖ, what kind of an organization is that, what kind of damage it made to Turkish state and Turkish public and Turkish society. I think we had enough discussion about FETÖ. I can also understand that there are some still misunderstandings all around the world about what is FETÖ. But I believe if the audience about these kinds of topics like FETÖ are genuine enough, they can easily understand what this organization is and what kind of a damage it has made to Turkish public life. But if it is not a genuine understanding, then it's quite difficult to explain what is FETÖ. It is a unique organization, it's a terrorist organization, but it tries to leak into state organization. It's a little bit different type of a terrorist organization. But our Western partners had a difficulty in understanding what kind of an organization is that. But after 4 years, I believe it's quite clear if you really want to understand what it is. So instead of talking about causes of FETÖ and causes of coup attempt in Turkey, I will just try to give just some highlights about what kind of an effect it had on Turkish foreign policy. It was just one of the events. It was just one of those dramatic events in Turkish experience in the last 5 to 6 years. Just consider Turkey was struggling in Syria with some other terrorist organizations at that time period. And Turkey was a part of NATO, a candidate for the membership of European Union for long periods of time. So Turkey and Turkish nation always considered itself as part of the Western partnership. So in all these kinds of dramatic events, Turkish public and Turkish state, as can be understood, was expecting support of Western partnership. But in most of these events, Turkish public understood that it was not there when Turkey needed those kinds of supports. Just FETÖ coup attempt was just one of them. We had just minor support from Western partnerships in these events. So it also contributed that Turkish national interest or Turkish understanding of foreign policy or Turkish understanding of the way of life in Turkey may not just overlap with the Western expectations. This was this process. This is a process. This is not just understood in just one day. Just consider the case of Syria. Our ambassador gave a very good summary of Turkish dealing with Syria. But let me remind you a few things. Turkey was supporting the democratization movement in Syria as expected by its Western partners. And the United States was expected playing a huge role in that democratization movement. But day by day, Turkish people and Turkish state observed that Turkey was left alone in the case of Syria. And when migration started from Syria, we have received no support from European partners. When terrorist events started to strike towards Turkey, again, we have just some condolences, but we have not received enough support from our Western partners. Instead, Turkey clearly, in principle, argued that Syria is a civil war situation. In these kinds of civil war situations, there might be a large number of terrorist organizations. So terrorism is terrorism in all cases. It doesn't matter what kind of terrorist organization, it doesn't matter what kind of title they are using. If international terrorism is a threat to all of us, then all states should just cooperate in these kinds of events. But instead, some states, most Western partners, like to stay aside in the Syria case. Instead of, they wanted Turkey to play the most part of dealing with these issues. And then we observed, instead of supporting Turkey, the United States gave a huge support to a PKK, to a terrorist organization which is called PKK, which Turkey fought against that organization more than 4 decades. This was unbelievable in the eyes of Turkish people. Instead of finding a solution to Syria, instead of fighting against all kinds of terrorist organizations, you cannot just say that I'm fighting ISIS, so I'm gonna support another terrorist organization in fighting ISIS. This was the point which created a breakthrough in the minds of Turkish people. Then we start to consider if this is if this is the most important threat to Turkish public, then we need to see our partners together in fighting this terrorist organization. If you don't see that, then you will try to find your own ways in dealing these terrorist events. Please keep in mind, please remember that between 2013 until 2016, Turkish state was attacked by different terrorist organizations at each weekend. If Turkey did not intervene in Syria, probably these terrorist organizations will keep attacking towards Turkey. So if you are not getting any support from your partners, and if you are sure that these terrorist attacks are coming from Syria, leaving all other issues like democratization, migration problem in Syria, you need to find a solution to that problem. And Turkey started 3 different military operations in Syria. And please let me remind you again that after these military operations, Turkey did not have a chronic terrorist attacks problem in Turkey anymore. Please remember, each weekend, Turkish airline organizations, Turkish football games were all being attacked. But after military operations, Turkey cleared its borders out of terrorist organizations. So this created a new understanding in the minds of Turkish people. If you want to protect your own country, if you want to fight against terrorism, then you should take care of your own business, because we are not living in the world of 90s anymore. Because the world of 90s, or the world of US hegemonic role played until 2010, is not over there anymore. Today we are discussing the coronavirus issue. Today we are discussing international institutions. Today the United States is already leaving World Health Organization. So it's not playing a hegemonic role anymore. This is why when this COVID-19 event is covering all around the world, all nation states are taking care of their own business. We didn't see that European Union was helpful enough for the Italian case. We don't see that a European Union is going to be helpful for each other. But instead, we observe that even in the European Union, most of the nation states are trying to keep and develop their own foreign policy understandings. The last one, I'm going to keep it short, the last example of new understanding of Turkish foreign policy, and I believe it is most related to the Syria case. After learning in the Syria case, Turkey was clear that some European countries dealing with the Eastern Mediterranean issue were creating a fait accompli. And Turkey is sharing a huge border on the Mediterranean. But some countries are signing some agreements, which is going to limit Turkey's offshore and Turkey's littoral territories. So Turkey decided that it's not possible to accept these kinds of arrangements. And also, Libya became a part of this game. That is why Turkish state is keeping its legal support for the Sarraj government. If the United Nations has already admitted that Sarraj government is the legal representative of Libya, if there is a civil war event over there, then all neighboring countries are going to be affected because of this new situation. That's why Turkey is supporting peace and stability in Libya. But as we can understand from the case of Syria, Russia is also trying to play a huge role. And I just want to warn some of our European friends that Russia is being invited to Libya by the help of France. So it's becoming really an interesting new play game, and that's why I believe this is the place where Turkey and Italy is sharing a huge geopolitical interest together. France is playing a role which is close to Russia, and Libya is just can be viewed as the southern border of Italy. Migration, terrorism, all kinds of events can affect Italy as it affected Turkey in Syria. That's why I believe that Turkey and Italy, beyond all these measures given by my colleague Valeria Giovannotta, beyond that, there is a huge Libya event which is going to connect Turkey and Italy together. Otherwise, there will be a new unstable region which is going to export terrorism, which is going to export migration, not just to its close neighbors, but as the first step to Italy, I believe. That's why Turkey and Italy, as important and responsible neighbors of the Mediterranean region, has a huge interest in dealing with this Libya issue together. I believe it's enough for now. Maybe if we can have a question, I will just cover in details some other issues. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Yalchun. Thank you, all of you. You gave really important and valuable information to our viewers. And I want to start the question and answer session. As you can see, if you permit, our only female panelist, Ms. Valeria Giovannotta, I would like to ask the first question to her by positive discrimination. Mr. Giovannotta, this question for you. Education appears as one of the areas where the Turkish-Italian relations could be further developed. What can be done to this end?
First of all, I was very upset just after the coup attempt because some of the Italian universities withdrew from the Erasmus project. So there was a sort of fatigue in order to attract back the Italian students to Turkey. And I think we should work, as I'm doing my part actually in Turkey, in order to build bridge and to carry out a positive perception of Turkey. I mean, Turkey as a stable country, as a competitive country, as a secure country as well. There are several students, as far as I know, Turkish students in Italy along the Erasmus project, the Jean Monnet project, and the bilateral agreement between the universities and institutions. I think actually we have to start from the out. Start from the out by carrying and attract the Italians and Europeans as such to Europe. At the end of the day, even the education sector in Turkey is very rich. There are several vocational schools, several state and very notable and valuable universities, several private universities. They are trying to specialize in different sectors. There are several projects in order to attract the foreign students to Turkey, like the Türkiye Bursları, that they are providing even financial support to foreigners to come to and study in Turkey. I think we should follow this line. We should follow this line and starting from the youth, trying to make young people understanding that actually we are friends, that everything we have said before, we should concretize in order to attract interest and in order to attract sympathy, I mean, to consolidate our synergy. So I wish, and in my small world as a foreign Italian academician in Turkey, I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to push in order to give a positive idea of Turkey. At the end of the day, I moved here in 2010 as a single woman, and I'm still here, and I never felt alone in Turkey. I always found welcoming people in a welcoming working environment. So I think we should make people understand in this, that even culturally, we are not so far away for the reason that we mentioned before. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Yalchun, I want to ask to you the second question, and you gave some information about actually what I want to ask again. Given the emergency of democratization moments in the North Africa from 2011 onwards, how do you see chance of cooperation between Turkey and Italy in North Africa and Libya in particularly? Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Democratization was a good dream in North Africa and greater Middle East, but it was left by the huge Western partnership. That is why I believe that we are not, unfortunately, we are not at a good level of democratization right now, or we don't have any expectation for the future. Let me just make a very simple generalization. In most of the democratized countries of the Arab Spring, or in most of the Arab Spring countries, you can divide them into two groups. On the one side, those having close relations with the United States before, and on the other side, those who do not have close relations with the United States, like Libya, Syria, Yemen. Those who held close relations with the United States turned with new coups in their own countries towards not democratization, but military dictatorials. Those who do not have close relations with the United States in their previous history turned into civil war situations. And there is just one example, that's Tunis, that can give us some kind of optimistic view, but I'm not so sure about its future. But the case of Libya doesn't look like, for me, doesn't look like as an optimistic case. So if you have a civil war on your neighborhood, then you will have two things in your country. Syria taught us that: migration and terrorism. That is why I believe that Turkey and Italy should cooperate on these two issues, just to create stability in Libya, and that stability will, I believe, disseminate to a greater Mediterranean region. Beyond all these economic, political, European Union issues, I believe Libya is going to be a deciding factor in Turkish and Italian relations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Ambassador Marsili, I want to ask to you, economic aspects are traditionally a positive agenda item in Turkish-Italian relations. In this context, what is your assessment about the Turkish investments in Italy and vice versa? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think that we have enjoyed a very, very good relations from an economic point of view between Italy and Turkey since many years. And now we have reached this level of about 20 billion US dollar, which is a high level anyhow, even if our target should be even more. I think that the level of investments of Italy to Turkey is quite good, but there are certain ground for increasing it, and I hope it will be done in the future. And as far as Turkey is concerned, in Italy, again, there is still ground for more investments also from the Turkish side. Of course, we have to take into consideration that now the situation is not brilliant. The economic situation in Italy is a difficult one. The economic situation in Turkey is, of course, difficult one. We are all aware of it. So we cannot expect to increase our bilateral presence in the next future in a strong way. But I do hope that after this strange year, next year, for instance, can be a year of recovery for both countries. And we will have the possibility of increasing the investment because there are many fields on which we can do something. You know, there are many Italian entrepreneurs who are keen on Turkey. More or less all the Italian industries in Turkey are very happy of the situation there, of the possibility for them to work there. So of course the COVID period has blocked a lot of things, but it's a matter of time. I think that we can start reasonably well again in the next future.
Thank you so much. Today, our last question for Mr. Ambassador Murat Salim Esenli. And Mr. Ambassador, we know that the Western world remained silent for a long time after the coup attempt on July 15. How would you evaluate the situation at the point reached today? And what has changed about looking at the July 15 coup attempt in Europe, especially in Italy, over a 4-year period? Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Ambassador, I interrupted you. I think your voice is unmute, Mr. Esenli.
How about now?
Okay.
Am I back? Okay, wonderful. As I was saying, Professor Gianotta indicated that certain universities try to discourage their students from going to Turkey in the aftermath of 2016 coup attempt, and which is true. Once we realized that, as an embassy, we made demarches before a number of universities, and I have personally written to the presidents of these universities, and the comeback was extremely helpful. And currently, I can assure you that this problem is to a great extent eliminated. And there is a certain higher level of interest from Italian students towards Turkey. And in order to stimulate the educational aspect in our pipeline, we are trying to open an Italian-Turkish university in Istanbul. As Turkey, we have already concluded all the necessary legal work for this. And we are hoping that the Italian side would finish its bureaucratic aspects as quickly as possible. Because once we have this kind of university in Turkey, it's going to be an enormously powerful synergy to advance in any field you can think of. Medical sciences, trade, arts, history, you name it. And so that's why we are putting a lot of emphasis on that. And another indicator is that before COVID-19, we have had almost 3,000 Turkish students studying in Italy. Of course, they had to return to Turkey, and we will see how things will develop. Concerning Professor Yalçın's comments, I fully agree with what he had said, and I wish to add that we can do a lot of infrastructure projects in Africa, also with Italy, just like the ones we have successfully concluded in other parts of Europe with Italian companies. We can engage in agro-industry, health, and definitely on the refugee issues, because we are face to face with similar challenges in that respect. And concerning Ambassador Marsili's comments, as always, he's a very senior ambassador. He's very knowledgeable, and he's someone that I look to as guidance. And he is absolutely right. There is still a huge ground for improvement. And when we had a working visit from Italy at the level of Prime Minister Conte on the 13th of January, with my president, Erdogan, they both agreed to increase our trade volume from 20 to 30 billion. And in my opinion, given the enormous potential of Turkey and Italy, we can easily achieve this target. So, of course, how things would look in the post-COVID-19 period is to be seen, but we need to be optimistic. Otherwise, with certain pessimism, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we need to overcome such pessimistic approaches. And after all, when we look at the number of Italian companies that are operational in Turkey, it is another encouraging sign. There are 1,500 of them doing work in Turkey. And of course, now the investment concept is not one-way street. It's a two-way street. And last years, I have been engaged in, for instance, inaugurating a Şişecam investment in Manfredonia here. We have had a company, Yılport, which had taken concessions in Taranto. So all these things are clear indication that we are having a mutual investment in a very vibrant level. Now, back to my question. Sorry, I have been a little bit lengthy, but I just want to address them because they were all important subjects in order to understand our bilateral relations. When I first arrived here, which was shortly after the foiled heinous coup attempt, and believe me, at the press, there were comments which try to understand what has happened in Turkey, to those which were presenting FETÖ's attempts as just simple setup and that it should not be taken seriously. From that extreme, now we have reached to a completely different level, a 180 degrees change, and nobody is now questioning the aspect or the danger and the criminal side of Fethullah Gülen terrorist organization. So this is a huge shift in a period of 4 years. And I would like to, of course, thank to a number of individuals in that kind of awareness. For instance, Ambassador Carlo Marsili had contributed enormously in that respect. Also, Professor Gianotta had contributed tremendously. And of course, from our side as NBC, we have done our humble contribution in terms of increasing that kind of awareness.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. I would like to thank our esteemed panelists, and we came together on the 4th anniversary of the July 15 coup attempt. I think it was a very efficient webinar. We also thank you our valuable viewers for watching us, and thank you all, and goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.